Welcome to the Legacy Through Land podcast, where we're dedicated to empowering you on your journey to land ownership and management. I'm Tyler Markham, your host, and each week we'll dive deep into the world of land investing, management strategies, and the transformative experiences tied to owning your very own piece of dream dirt. With our expert guests, inspiring stories, and actionable advice, we're committed to helping you become a better land manager, hone your investing skills, and start building your family's legacy through land. Now, let's dive into this week's episode. We hope you'll enjoy. All right, welcome back to episode 59 of the Legacy Through Land podcast. You guys don't normally know the number, but I happen to have recorded one yesterday. So I do know that today is 59. I am super, super excited to be able to talk with you, Don. So I appreciate you being on here.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to share my experiences and hopefully help others.
Yeah, well, that's what we're going to dive into here. I think a lot of people, listening to this are going to say, hey, can you ask this? Can you ask this? And we want to hear this story. And how about this story? And I'd love to ask you, 1,000 questions and do a 6-hour podcast. But in order for us to stay on track, I really want to dive into, obviously what's keeping you busy right now. And, the thing that I told Don offline is just that I think he's easily one of the first guys that I think of when I think of people that have been able to create a life and a lifestyle and an entire life journey centered around all things land. And so I really think this is going to be a fun talk track to go through. But if we could just kind of start, Don, now that we're recording here, we're at the tail end of April. My daughters remind me of that rhyme, what is it? 30 days, half September, April. I'm going to mess it up. April, June, and November.
I thought it was June. No, I'm wrong because I know July.
Well, it's April 30th. We'll say it that way. It is the tail end of April. So I expect, if I have this correct, you finished up consulting season. Mm-hmm. When was your last consult?
It was about 2 weeks ago, early April. I did a tour up through Wisconsin. I was up there, I think, for 9 days. And then I came back home and I had 2 or 3 halfway local where I didn't have to stay overnight. I could drive and drive back the same day. So I'm going to guess somewhere around April 10th or so, I wrapped up.
Okay. So and I'm going to guess it's mostly you're wrapping things up before that spring green up, and that's pretty much when you call it quits.
Right. Yeah. We only consult, typically start right after Thanksgiving, about the 1st of December, and go to early April, and it starts getting green. You can't see too well. And in September, we try to wrap things up. So we want to make sure that we can see the terrain good, every little feature while we're on these properties. So we don't do it when the vegetation's leafed out.
Yep. And then I'm going to guess now you've been able to, kind of snap on the habitat improvement hat at your own property. And now it's back to work on your own place.
Yeah, this year's been a little different. I hadn't been home from Wisconsin too long. And my wife had been not feeling well since January, and took her to the doctor, and they found some tumors. So we made a trip to Mayo Clinic in Minnesota earlier this week. In fact, we just got home the day before yesterday. And we got to go back next week for her to have surgery. And who knows after that. But it's really cut into my plans. But it definitely takes precedence over anything else I've got going. I did have a chance to start on my food plots. And I probably got half of those planted before we went to Mayo Clinic. And then while we was there, we actually got almost 4 inches of rain while we was gone. So I'm sitting here now with not a whole lot to do because it's too muddy. I'm going to do some TSI work, cut out some locust trees and such in a couple areas on the farm and spray them. But my wife's health is number one at the moment, but trying to work in some of that habitat work around that.
Yep. Amen. I mean, I totally agree. And Don, we can talk about this offline or cut this if we need to. I was curious, just kind of the any updates on Andrea. We've just continued to pray for Andrea, and every time I go get my seed, I'm talking with Corey, and it was busy. So last time I was there, we just weren't really able to talk, and I just didn't know how things have been going. And I know they've been obviously going through a lot, and I don't know, are they fully moved now and all that?
Yeah, so they built a new house last year, and right before Christmas they moved in. So they're just right down the road from me, maybe a quarter mile. And so I got my grandsons close, which is going to really change things for me this coming season. But she's doing great. She had a scan last, when would it have been? It would have been, no, actually it was this week. It was Tuesday of this week. She had a scan, no signs of cancer whatsoever.
Amen.
She's just amazing. That her attitude, I wish I had her attitude. She's got a much better attitude about things than I do. Always positive, always looking to help others. And so she's doing great.
Amen. Amen. That is so good to hear. So good to hear. Well, we will keep your wife in our prayers. I've been following your stories and your posts, and you are exactly right. The silver lining, Don, obviously, I'm sure it's hard to be able to see any of the good throughout this turmoil, but the silver lining is you're able to go to Mayo Clinic. And I believe, I'm working with a seller right now who's also going to Mayo Clinic, and seems like it's one of the top places in the country, if not the top. And that's got to be a blessing. Got to be a blessing to be able to have that time and freedom to be intentional with her care. So I know it's probably tough to see it, but I always try to think, man, what would it be like if we just literally could not be intentional with those kinds of things? How different would it be? So we will be praying for her.
Well, I appreciate that. And you've seen it on social media. I've made posts about it, and my original post, which would have been a couple of weeks ago, probably now, I kind of threw it out there, and for two reasons. One, asking for prayer, but the other one was I've got a fairly extensive following on social media, and we were trying to get into Mayo Clinic, and I thought somebody in my following has got a contact at Mayo Clinic.
Yep.
Well,
I saw that post.
Literally, I had three people within probably 12 hours of making that post. I had three people reach out to me that had contacts at Mayo Clinic. And so I gave them my wife's patient number because she had applied online to get in, and they gave her a patient number. And I gave them the patient number and said, do what you can do. And less than 24 hours after making that post, someone in the hunting industry, I mean, a big name in the hunting industry, I don't want to throw their name out there because I don't want them to get bombarded with calls and stuff, reached out to me and said, hey, we've got a guest house 20 minutes from Mayo's that you can use, and I've got contacts at Mayo's. Let me see what I can do. And I said, great, here's my wife's patient number. And literally from that correspondence, within 12 hours, my wife got a call from Mayo's and said, we're accepting you. Can you be here next Tuesday? And we actually got that moved up to Monday, which was this week. And we was up there and just got home, and we're going back next week for surgery. So, if you follow me very long, you're going to hear me just getting down on the haters and everything else on social media and within the hunting industry. But I'm telling you, there are some great people out there. You'll see the post I've made have, over 1,000 reactions and countless people praying for her, and lots of people have reached out privately that didn't. And some of the biggest names in the hunting industry have actually reached out privately to me, saying that she's in their prayers and such, and what can we do to help. So the hunting industry is very special to me. And yeah, it's got some issues and it's got some questionable characters. I'll just leave it at that. But there's a lot of great people in the hunting industry, and we are just so blessed that they've kind of wrapped their arms around us at this moment, and they're praying for us and offering various ways of help. And it's a journey that I tell her that there's going to be a testimony at the end of this chapter of our life, and it's a testimony that's going to help others. And
yeah.
So we are very grateful for all the people that have reached out. And I know this podcast isn't about this, but I'm telling you, the hunting world has just opened a lot of doors for me.
Well, I think it is about that, Don. I don't want you to be shy about it at all, because you guys talk about it all the time, but we have to step back and say these are kingdom connections. Like this is ordained by God. This was anointed by God. It's the greatest reminder for me of there's just so much more to this than shooting a deer. There's just so much more to this.
Absolutely. It's the people.
It is. It is. I'll never forget one of my favorite pastors. I know you'll resonate with this. One of my favorite pastors I've ever heard preach. And I watched a spontaneous revival with this guy where he literally said, we're going to have a revival. And if someone gets saved, we're going to go another night. And we went 76 nights or something like that in a row, over 600 people saved. I watched miracles. Like I watched people walk off stage that could see, that couldn't see before. I watched these things. But that same pastor, he said, the ministry, I just love being in ministry if it just wasn't for the people. So we just have to deal with people. And that's the worst part of it. And so it's the same in anything. I always think of that and I hear you and Terry talk about it. And I've seen it myself. I've only been, kind of in the space. I've been a real estate investor since 2015, full time, did a lot of house flips, all these things that were outside of, hunting ground. And in 23, I went just full time into, we're going to do, recreational land. Like that's what we're going to do. So I'm not even near as deep into what I would call the hunting deep state as you are. Just the bits and pieces I've seen are very ugly and toxic in places that I've just and it was really deflating, honestly, to see how divided we are, inside of a little niche space like the hunting community. But stories like this, Don, is what reminds us all that we have to focus on the good. We have to see the good and let the good win, not let the hate and the bitterness and the, jealousy and all the other weird words for what's going on lead. Look at Robin's story, look at the testimony, look at the connections that you've been able to make. And, for the non-believers listening, just do the math that this was all just about a deer. It doesn't add up. It does not add up. That's just amazing. So we're going to be praying for you guys. I'm trusting that we'll have the same expectation and answer. I'm super thankful to hear that about Andrea, but Robin's going to be in our prayers. And I already have seen your post that, we're not the only people. There are tons of people that are surrounding you guys and carrying this with you. So we'll be anxiously awaiting updates. If you don't care to keep me posted as you can, or do make those social media posts that sometimes may be uncomfortable, because these are the things that people do need to hear for sure.
Yeah, I realized a long time ago that big deer are my passion, but big deer gave me this platform, but big deer are not my purpose. And my purpose is to help others and to hopefully lead others to Christ. And it's just amazing the doors that have been opened through deer hunting. And I said many times that the best thing that deer hunting ever did for me was the people that I met through deer hunting.
Yep. Yeah. And I've watched all your posts about some of your consulting clients that come to mind, and just some of I think there was a guy from New York recently that you did a post about, and just how great of a guy. And it's like, God will remind you. I know he will remind you along the path. Hey, guess what, Don? I authored this whole thing. It wasn't you. It wasn't you, Tyler. Guess what? I ordained the whole thing, and I'll show you. I'll bring people along your path that remind you I am true north. It's so cool. I want to back up for a second, Don. Two questions in consulting season as you kind of put that hat on the shelf. Tell me back to the year or the time, because I'm not so concerned with the number. I just think these are interesting. But what was probably the peak number consulting season? What was the year you did the most? What was your highest number in a year?
Well, I think I was into doing somewhere in the 80s, mid 80s, a few years ago. I slowed down a little bit. I need to slow down more, to be honest. but I can't hardly tell people no. But it was a few years ago that I peaked.
And that's probably if we kind of break that into chunks, how many miles in a, you start consulting season, I'm going to guess what, late December? When's your earliest?
Yeah, I usually start like right after Thanksgiving weekend, like the Monday after Thanksgiving, which is typically about the 1st of December. And yeah, I'm on the road basically until early April.
What's your average miles, and what was probably the peak miles in that, if you remember?
Well,
we'll delete this from Chris Yates hearing it.
Yeah. So, yeah, we got Chris Yates, GMC and Chevrolet as a sponsor of our podcast. And as part of our arrangement with him, he wants us to trade our trucks in when they get about 25 to 30,000 miles. Well, I'm getting a new truck about every 9 months. I'm getting a new truck. So,
yeah,
I'm probably doing 40,000 miles a year. I mean, just this past winter, for example, I was as far east as Maryland, came home from that trip and went to central Kansas. But then I went back east to New York. And then I was up in Michigan, Wisconsin, as I mentioned, down in Kentucky. And it's a whirlwind for about, 4 or 5 months there in the winter. But, the good thing is it keeps me active all winter long. I'm not just sitting behind a desk while it's cold out, and I meet some great people. I wish I was 20 years younger. If I was your age, I just need to slow down just a little bit.
Well, and I mean, you've earned the right. I've heard you talk about it that unfortunately, the only way for you to be able to slow down is you've got to charge more and pick the clients that want to work more with you. And it's just like any, profession, when you've earned the right and the thousands and thousands of hours and miles of experience, like you've earned the right to be able to charge more. And I wouldn't feel bad at all if I was you and someone said, hey, I can't pay that. And this or that. Because if they want you to do it for less, or they want you to still fit them in, they are actually asking you to make them a priority over your own family. And I don't like that as much as I used to not care. I've got 12, 10 and 3-year-old daughters, and it matters a lot more when I'm around now, it just does. And that time is not time that I'll get back. And so I get it. Like I do. I wouldn't feel any heartburn about it at all. That, I think let's give Wes some love here. I think that's probably why Wes was at my farm twice is, we got to spread the load here between, I can't even keep track of who all's in your gang now, but I know it's Terry and Wes and, Bobby Worthington, I want to say. And I mean, how many consultants are in the group?
Well, besides myself, I've got 6 guys working under me. There'd be Terry Peer, my co-host on Chasing Giants, Wes Delks, who you've worked with a couple times, Bobby Worthington, Derek Burkholder, who lives up in northern Indiana. He runs that Midwest outdoor show, Midwest Sportsman's Classic, it's called.
Okay.
I've got a gentleman in Missouri, David Elliott, and then one out on the East Coast in Delaware, Caleb Gaiman. So those guys, they all stay busy. I mean, Wes does more consulting visits than I do every year.
Yep. Do you know what your number was this year? If we kind of just contrast back to, how well are you doing at slowing down?
Yeah, I haven't totaled it up to be honest. I do a spreadsheet. I should know by this time because usually when I wrap it up, I'm totaling up the dollars so that I can pay tithe on it. And I usually have a number on the number as well, the total number of visits. And I don't have that at the moment, but
no worries. It's less than 80, right?
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Okay.
I was busy this winter, but I could have handled more.
Well, all right, guys, I guess you're hearing it now. Give him a call. He'll just show up. He can't say no.
Well, this situation with my wife was really eye-opening. It's almost like God was trying to get my attention, and because she's been asking me to slow down for 2 or 3 years now, and I'm definitely going to have to do that and pick and choose, and I think she's going to go with me on more trips, but there's going to be fewer trips. So
Yep. Well, and I mean, for someone that doesn't respect that, doesn't respect what the actual goal is here. And it's like I told you before we started, like for me, we have to figure out how to, and I've got a friend that I'd love to introduce you to sometime that's kind of a mentor of mine, really, really good Christian man, very accomplished hunter, but David Miller, if he's listening, Dave told me one time, and he makes social posts about this, but go outside so you can look inside. And if everything we're doing is not about that, like you just are missing it. You just are. And, I'm fully convinced guys like you, Don, and myself that drive a hard, line, like we're not just built to pay bills and die. There is more, there's got to be more to it. If it's just, and let's use Robin, for example. I haven't had the occasion to meet Robin, but I've heard through just all of your episodes that Robin doesn't spend a ton of time in a deer blind. Robin doesn't spend a ton of time checking her switchgrass and making sure she's spraying things correctly. So when Don leaves this world, if he does it before Robin, he's got all these deer heads that are now a burden to her that she couldn't care anything about. And if that's the only thing you're measuring, and believe me, I'd really like to have some of yours, by the way. If that's the only thing you're measuring, though, as the success of your life, like I think it was T-Bone and Michael Waddell were talking about this one time, like if I just leave this world, these mounts are a burden to someone now. They aren't a help. They aren't life-giving. What am I leaving in someone is what we worry about, not what am I leaving with them,
Yeah, I've said that, someday I'm going to take my last breath and my family's going to be there at the funeral. They're going to be receiving guests,
Yep.
whatever you want to call them.
And pleasantries and all that.
And if the only comments that they hear are in regards to deer hunting, then I've wasted my life. If all they hear is Don was a great deer hunter, or I love Don's magazine articles about deer hunting or whatever, if that's the only thing that they hear, then I've wasted my life. And it's about much more than that. And that's really hit home with me in recent years, especially after Andrea had cancer a few years ago. My legacy is way more. It's not about the deer I shot. It's about how I impacted lives in that journey.
Amen. It is. It really is. And I find it kind of a cool opportunity for you, Don. I'm not sure you do this all the time. Not sure you don't, but anytime I've sold a piece of land and if I've built a good connection with who I'm selling it to, and you immediately start to kind of intertwine yourself in how those people are going to create legacy with that land and their family. You get married to that. Like it's an insatiable desire for you to see that happen. And a lot of times I find myself praying with them over that land, like blessing this land, because it's got to be about those chapters that define their lives. It's got to be about those chapters with your grandsons now that you get to have. It's got to be about what are we leaving in them? Not just, hey, we're going to go out and trim locusts and do some TSI work. Like, that it can't only be about that. And I really know, I've listened to almost every one of your guys' podcasts. I wouldn't beat yourself up too hard because I'm seeing this in you where you're now measuring, hey, what is the time that I get to spend with Corey and Andrea? What is the time with the grandkids? We may shoot more management bucks for the sake of just being out here. Like, and that is okay too, I've enjoyed watching you say, I don't have a deer to hunt on my farm. Like mind blowing to people that are like, you spend thousands of hours doing these things. But when you're as entrenched in it as you are, there's got to be some comfortability in saying, I'm just okay with being on this journey. It's not just about killing a big deer. I'm okay with all of the other stuff. And that kind of, I want to go 10,000 foot view here, Don, like, something I've wanted to ask you for a long time. And this is just really, and by the way, listeners, I didn't give this question to Don. I didn't give him a cheat sheet before we started. So answer how you will. But how would you explain to someone who just doesn't, they're just outside this hunting world and all these crazy hunterisms that we live and die about. How would you explain to someone, why do you hunt, Don? Why deer? Why whitetails? Why do you hunt?
Well, it's a passion that was put into me at birth, I guess, or even before birth when God created me. He gives us all, different interests and different passions. And I'm a little different than I think of most people because I had basically one outdoor passion. Now, when I was younger, I did it all, I hunted small game. I used to go out west and hunt other big game species. But as I got older, I just focused on bow hunting only, mature whitetail bucks. And that became my single passion. And why? It's really tough to say why. It's just something that is in me, in my soul, really, that God created me to do. And I think, as I get older, you kind of look back. They say a young man is always looking ahead to the future and an old man is always looking back to the past. So I'm kind of probably more on the old man side today at 62 years old, where I'm looking back probably a little bit more than I'm looking ahead. And it seems like God gave me this passion for a reason. And that reason was he wanted to use me to reach lost deer hunters. And, back in March, I spoke at a church in Missouri. I was on the consulting trail. Got a good friend over in Missouri, Aaron Gaines, who is the nutritionist for Real World. And he asked me to speak at his church. And obviously I couldn't tell him no. He's just a great friend. And so I worked that in on a consulting trip. And, I told the people there that, hunting is my passion. Hunting is my platform, but it's not my purpose. I said this earlier, my purpose is to reach lost deer hunters. And I think sometimes we get inheritance and legacy confused. And I know I did for a long time. I listened to a sermon when I was on the road this winter. And I thought that my farm was my legacy that I'm leaving to my grandkids. And I've been working hard to build that farm, to add acres, to make it the best habitat possible. And yeah, in a way, that's the legacy, but it's really an inheritance. The legacy is the values that I'm instilling in those grandkids. When we do something, we're going to do it right. We're going to go above and beyond the law. We're going to do things ethically. I think there's a lot of things that are legal that are not ethical. And we'd look outside the hunting industry and then the hunting world, abortion would be one of them. Abortion's legal, but I don't consider it ethical. Not to get into that debate, but I think even within the hunting world, there's things that are legal that I don't consider ethical. And I want my grandkids to know that when we do something, we're going to do it right. Not only right by man's laws, but right by God's laws. And my legacy is going to be how we went about doing things. Because, I've got 3 grandsons and a granddaughter right now. And the odds of any of them being as serious about deer hunting and habitat as I have been is pretty slim.
Yep.
But, my parents and grandparents, none of them had the passion for the outdoors that I had. Now, my grandfather did to some degree, but not to the degree that I've got. But it was the values that they instilled in me, life values, not hunting values, life values, that has allowed me to be successful and to have this platform and to do good with it. And I want my grandkids, no matter what they choose to do in life, to have a foundation of principles and ethics that they carry with them in anything that they do. And, as they get older and start to make their way in life, I want them to be able to look back at the values. And that's my legacy, is the values that I'm instilling in my grandkids, not the inheritance, which is the farm that I'm leaving behind.
Don, I'm at a loss for words. I've never heard it put that way, but it is so accurate. That is such an accurate articulation of leaving something with somebody versus leaving something in somebody. And I've never heard it that way. That's hard to hear because something I say a lot on the podcast is, and my own company, Legacy Acres Land Company. Like when I started this company in my mind, I wanted a different word for legacy. Like I searched for weeks. And I obviously know there's, land and legacy, and there's Legacy Land Company out in Illinois. Like I know all, it's a very saturated name, and that bugged me. And as I looked at the word legacy and like different meanings of it, and, even like, I was like, well, what can we go to Greek and like find a different way to say this? There's not another way to say it because that word is so heavy and the weight of it is so heavy. I think it's very saturated. And I hold this enormous responsibility on my own shoulders of, if we're going to say this word legacy, like we have to mean it. It just can't be a buzzword. And legacy, like you're explaining, legacy is not inheritance. It's not. Because like you just said, I mean, my daughter's like, Dad's going to pass you down land. And I was literally having this conversation with my wife the other day. I said, they are going to be my mom. Like we just sold a big farm in Jackson, Ohio, that was kind of our family farm. And my mom was raised on a farm, but never really cared about the farm, cattle farm, never really was into it. So we had this huge, big tract of land, and it became a burden to her in her brain. In her mind, it became a burden. It wasn't an asset. It became a liability to her. And we sold the land. And my mom, and this is no shade to her, but she really couldn't have cared less from, what we lost by selling that land. My stepdad and I, it was our thing. Mm-hmm. Well, I sit back and say, that's my daughters. That's my daughters. They couldn't care less about what Dad owns. They really and I'm not saying that I'm not going to teach them about the value of what I own. And you're not saying you're not going to teach these grandsons about the value of the land you own. But if the only thing we're worried about measuring is, do they care about what I'm giving them? You're missing it. You're just missing it. It's super hard to hear because, Don, I'm like 20 years behind you in this journey of making my life about dirt and about legacy and about habitat and about selling land and all these things. And I think we're a sellout. I think we're sellouts if we don't actually try to impact people we're working with. I think we're really sellouts, and that's tough.
Well, I think we can tie the inheritance we're leaving with the legacy we're leaving. And a good example of that is, so the farm that I own today, the first purchase, the land purchase that I made was 30 acres. That was my grandparents.
I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, my mom was actually born on that 30 acres. And I've expanded that 30 acres to 300 today by buying tracts against it. So that 30 acres is part of the original farm right where I'm sitting at the moment. But much of the legacy that my grandfather left me was instilled in me on that 30 acres. So when I'm working on that 30 acres, and actually the whole farm today, I'm often thinking of my grandfather and thinking, I hope he's looking down from heaven with a big smile on his face, what I've done with what he left behind. So you can tie your inheritance and your legacy together. And, long after you're gone, your daughters can remember Dad on the farm, we was doing this or that. And he instilled this particular lesson in me at 8 years old or whatever. So You can tie that legacy and that inheritance together. But I think we should be careful not to become so focused on the inheritance that we forget the legacy.
It's so true. It's so true. And it's hard. I mean, it's hard. Like I employ myself, I have to make deals happen to employ my team. I have to, you have multiple businesses. You have to make products move to keep people employed. And it's hard not to get yourself wrapped up in, how do we continue to find success to move the needle forward? Because that's mostly what everyone's measuring is, how do we get paid? Like, how do we make sure we can have a living, make a living from this, I'm sure you're one of few people that really knows intimately what it feels like to carry the weight of, I have to go and produce for my family to live. I have to go produce. You own your businesses. You own the trajectory of the success or failure of your family, because It's all tied to, do you produce? Do you produce? And I know as men, like we could really go off on a sidebar, and I'm going to have an event, Don, that's just more, I want to pour back into men that are on a journey of trying to be the leaders of their house, be the leaders in their business, be the leaders in their family and their friends, their small groups, their church, all these things. It's a very lonely road. It's a very lonely road that not enough men talk about, the weight that it, comes with, to accept that I am going to do this and be the winner in all things. And I won't say it's thankless, but it's just what's expected. Our culture has said this is what's expected. And I want to be able to give back to that and kind of have some healing weekends and, more of a healing and restoration for men that I know, like yourself, carry a great big torch, because I'm sure you agree, God has instilled a great responsibility in you.
Well, there's scripture, to whom much is given, much is required. And I've always taken that literally, because it's in scripture. If he can't trust you with a little, why is he going to give you a lot? He's not. So I always try to be a good steward of whatever's given to me. And I say given, I worked for it, but God opened the doors for that to ever happen. And
correct.
I hope that people are listening will take this part of this podcast to heart, because I don't want them to think that I was born some guy with money in his pockets and it was easy for me to go out and do this. And if my story, I graduated high school and I was not going to go to college because I hated school. I absolutely hated it. And so I got a job at a local factory, and I worked at that factory job for 20 years out of high school. And for 20 years, my wife and we scraped by, got behind on bills. We had our electricity shut off multiple times. We had our phones shut off and disconnected. We lived in a pattern where we would get behind on our bills, and then we would get our income tax refund in the spring, and that income tax refund just went to catch up our bills. And then we spent a year getting behind again, and then we would catch up again at the next income tax refund, and did that for 20 years out of high school. And we lived paycheck to paycheck. Lots of times we didn't have the extra money to take our kids to McDonald's.
Yep.
And at about 40 years old, I decided that I was not going to. Well, actually, to really get into the story, I was working at a printing factory, and we printed magazines. And it wasn't even hunting magazines; it was women's magazines, and the Ladies' Home Journal, Family Circle. That was the stuff we was printing. And I was working third shift, and I hated working third shift. I could hardly stay awake all night working. And my job was to check the print quality of these magazines that were coming off of the press. And it would get so boring. You'd pick up a magazine every couple minutes and look at it, but the rest of the time you're just standing there, with not a whole lot to do. And this one particular night, to pass the time, you would actually read the magazine, even though it was a woman's magazine you cared nothing about. But there was this one night I was on the job, and the magazine we was printing at that time had an article that this guy had went into nursing homes, and he had interviewed old people at the very tail end of life, and asked them about the regrets they had in life. And every one of them regretted not taking more chances in life, whether it be financially or chances with love or whatever, not pursuing someone they had an attraction to or whatever. They all had regrets that they didn't do things. They didn't pursue things. Well, I made up my mind that night, standing right there at that press, that was not going to be me. I was not going to be 80, 90 years old in a nursing home wishing I'd done something else. And so I started looking. At that time, my wife and we owned 40 acres. We owned my grandparents 30, and then we'd bought an additional 10 that gave us a square 40. And we owned that, and I'm thinking to myself, there are people making a good living on less than 40 acres. Mm-hmm. What can I do on my 40 acres to make a living? And we started a tree nursery, because when we bought my grandparents' place, a couple of the first things we did, my grandpa had cut down trees in the yard, but he never replanted a tree in the yard. Why, I don't know. Probably money
Just
was
didn't
one
know
thing.
how or something.
Yeah. So we got the house, and there was not a tree in the yard. So one of the first things we did is we went to nurseries, and we was buying these burlap trees, big burlap trees to plant in the yard. And these things were costing us like $150 a piece. Well, at the same time, I signed up the pasture ground on the farm into a CRP tree program. And we planted, I don't know, 5,000 or 6,000 trees on that cow pasture. But we was planting seedlings, and these seedlings that we bought were like 50 cents a piece. And I'm like, wait a minute, here's a 50-cent seedling, and here's a $150 tree a few years later. I kind of made the connection, and we started a tree nursery. And within a couple of years, I was also planting CRP trees on CRP projects. And I met a good friend, Todd Ewing, whose father and him were buying and flipping a lot of properties. And when they were buying them, back in those days, the CRP payment would make the land payment. Land was cheap enough that the CRP would pay for the farm. And so they were buying farms, and they were paying me to plant the trees. And I was literally working 2 jobs. I was planting trees during the day, working at the factory at night. And in the spring, I was making as much money planting trees as I was working in a factory all year long. And I started the tree nursery, and there was one spring that I just wrapped up my spring CRP tree plantings. And I was beat. I'm planting trees all day, working in a factory all night, and I've been doing this for several weeks. And I already had work lined up for the next spring. And the trees that we had started on the farm for the nursery were going to be big enough to start digging that fall. And so I walked away from that factory job, and I had the tree nursery and the conservation tree planting service. And that got me out and got me on the road to success. But the lesson that I want the listener to hear here is that I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I didn't have money to start investing in land or anything. I just looked for ways out of the box to turn my small 40 acres profitable. And I knew that I couldn't do that growing a commodity that someone else was setting the price for, corn, soybeans, cattle, whatever. If somebody else is setting the price, then they're really limiting your ability to make a good profit. But with the tree nursery, there was that huge, gap between the 50-cent seedling and the $150 burlap tree. And I could set the price of that burlap tree. And I just, one of the things that I encourage, and I've said this before on other podcasts, is that when you buy land, there's a number of ways to make that land payment. And I encourage people to have an annual payment instead of a monthly payment. I think a lot of folks are, they bought a house or whatever, and they're making a monthly mortgage payment on a house. Well, when you buy land, you can make an annual payment, and that gives you a full year to come up with the money. Yeah, it's a much bigger payment than a monthly payment, but it gives you a year to figure out ways. And you can harvest timber, you can come up with specialty crops to grow. If you've got, it's only limited by your imagination how you can pay for that ground. So the big takeaway here, though, is that I wasn't born with a silver spoon. I made it happen by thinking outside the box. And I think if the listener takes that approach, they can do the same thing.
Amen. And what I'm curious of, Don, and as I was going to ask you the question, you kind of finished it on your own, is at some point, and listeners, you heard the classic statement: you're burning the candle at both ends. You're working in the factory, you're planting trees. So there's 2 questions I have, and you kind of answered the first one in that you read the magazine article and you said, hey, I'm determined to not be that person. What What was day one like, if you remember it? When was the impetus to just, all right, this is what I'm going to do. We're going to do the trees. You know, you have day one in there. What was that like, if you remember it, to just officially start? Because Don, you know, those guys that'll say, I have this business idea, and I also thought of this, and then I thought of this, and then this one, and they don't do it. They never do it. So what was it for you that, like, you were empowered in reading the article, but then there's got to be like ground zero, if you remember?
Well, you know, when I worked at that factory, I made a lot of great friends and got to know them really well because, you know, you spend a lot of time with them day after day after day, year after year. And I think that most of the people I worked with had a strong desire to get out of that factory and do something different. I think it was just it's the same thing that drives me to shoot big deer, is that I leave no stone unturned, and my passion to complete something that I have a desire for is just probably off the charts. And if you don't have that passion, I mean, there's a lot of people that dream big dreams. Wes Delks put it very well a while back in a conversation I had with him. He said, there's a lot of people that want to shoot big deer, and there's a lot of people that think about shooting big deer every single day. But he said, how many people actually do something that helps them kill big deer every single day, whether it be trying to gain permission on a new property or you know, anything like that, you know, working on tree stands, scouting, just all kinds of things. It's one thing to want it, but it's something totally different to have that passion at such a level that it drives you to get off the couch and do it. I mean, you can sit there on the couch and dream about anything, but to get up and get on your feet and walk outside and do something towards that goal, I just don't think everybody's got it. And I'm not talking down to anybody, because God made us all different, but he didn't make any one of us better than the other. And I just think that we're all made a little different, and some people just don't have the degree of passion.
Yeah. And it becomes, you know, I just think of so many analogies, but it becomes this boiling point with water. At some point, the water's got to boil, or at some point, the pot's got to melt over. At some point, something has to be enough. And for you, it sounds like, you know, that magazine article was just kind of the spark that lit the fire, that there's got to be more to this than just this. And for the listener, that's what I already told you. This is what I'm passionate about. I spoke at a real estate event last night. I tell them up front, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. Okay. I'm really not. I'll just outwork you. I will work to make sure it happens. And that has afforded me a lot of opportunities because of having that grit. And if you just don't have it, and this is the thing, again, go back to, you're going to live with more regrets. Work up the courage, pray up the courage to actually take the first step, and you'll be surprised where your, you know, life and your trajectory, your career, your legacy, your inheritance, whatever you want to measure, goes. Don, I want to circle back to something here. This is not in my notes at all, but you and I are having just the conversation that I know God needed us to have, and that's what I love the most. But instead of asking you about switchgrass, instead of asking you about, you know, miscanthus, and instead of asking you what actual habitat projects are you staying busy with right now, all these things that we could dive into, the brain of Don Higgins, I really want to stay at 10,000 feet here if we can. Where I have a question for you here. Just, this is timing, but I actually just bought my first farm in Illinois. I talked about this on my last week's podcast, as far as a project farm, a farm we're going to try and bring to the market, make better, and sell. And I'm unapologetic about that. Like, I don't hide that. That's what we do. I have beautiful kids, and they also need fed and clothed. So we have to do what we have to do. Love to keep every piece of dirt I buy. You know the game. I just can't. I can't. So we've got our first farm. We're excited. But in saying all this, I've been trying to build connections in Illinois for business, and just the things that you need to have to be able to operate, especially at a distance. So question I have for you, kind of a wild card here, but I've spent some time getting to know Mr. Chris Brackett, and I get to, for any listener here, it's not hard to get to know someone when they're, viral on social media, and they've been viral in the industry for as long as they have. Like, you can think you know Don Higgins or know Chris Brackett or know whomever you want to say. You can think you know them, but I have kind of sensed this journey, and if you're willing to answer this, he makes a statement that I want to ask you about, but I want to kind of get to that in a roundabout way. Not a statement about Don Higgins, spoiler alert. He's probably made those as well, but where do you feel like you're at? I don't know that he'll listen to this, but where do you feel like you're at with, your conversations with Chris? Because I have sensed some kind of, and maybe I'm overshadowing it too much, but some kind of healing or truce, or maybe finding some common ground. Like, are you willing to share where you would think you were at with that today?
Well, I've never had a problem with Chris, and he seems to have had a problem with me at one time, and I'm not sure why. Well, I've got a pretty good idea why. I think that
this is not for social views. Sorry, everybody. This is just true talk here.
I think that he was being fed some poor information about me by someone with an axe to grind.
Yeah.
And I think he accepted it as probably true. And yep. I don't know for sure what he was told, but I've heard reports that a certain person fed him some garbage about me. And I just was not going to engage in that, because the crazy thing is a few years ago, there was a social media post that Chris was just getting raked over the coals. Mm-hmm. And I mean, he was just getting hammered. And I jumped in, and I didn't, to his defense, and I didn't make a long-winded post. All I did was I posted a scripture. And I didn't even write the scripture out. I just posted the book, the chapter and the verse, and I let people go look it up for themselves.
Little Tim Tebow, John 3:16 under the eye. Yeah. And but believe me, Don, I have a point to this question, so keep going. Okay. I will tie this all together.
And the scripture that I posted was, "Let he who is without sin cast the first stone." Mm-hmm. For people that took the time to look it up. And I just left it at that. And so later, when Chris started hammering me, it was kind of, I couldn't understand it, because I'd stood up for the guy.
Yeah.
And I just was not going to engage in him, because other than bashing me for whatever reason, I knew there was some underlying factor there, because why would a guy just out of the blue start bashing someone the way he was? Yeah. And then someone told me that, well, what's going on here is someone with an axe to grind with you is feeding Chris this, because they personally don't have the guts to say it themselves. And they know Chris will say whatever's on his mind. And then they were using Chris as the sounding board. Uh-huh. And then, I did the podcast, the Hunter podcast, where I laid a bunch of things out. And I said, I don't have a problem with Chris Brackett. He could show up at my house. I'd let him in the front door. We'd sit here and have a conversation. Then we'd go out and I'd buy him lunch. Yep. I'm not going to.
And I remember that podcast, and I do. So I do have a few questions. Let me ask you. So this is why I bring this up, Don, because I feel like what God's doing, that I want to use this as an example, is I don't know the inner workings of your conversations with Chris Brackett, or lack of conversations, or whatever it is. Don't know the inner workings of the person in the middle who has bitterness to you and probably fed it to Chris. As I'm building business connections in Illinois, I had talked to Chris months ago, and we kind of knew some mutual people. And anyways, I find myself in Chris's house 2 weeks ago. We're having dinner. Find myself at Chris's place. This farm that I'm buying to renovate is in Knox County. It happened to be really close to him. The Hunter guys, I had recently been on their podcast, and Jared and Jeremy, obviously they're friends of Chris. And so like the wildest thing, I was like, do you want to see this farm and just kind of give me your thoughts on it? I'm going to need an agent. I'm going to need somebody out there to help me sell this farm. Not that I don't think we can sell it ourselves, but I'm 7 hours away. And I find myself in Chris's basement, find myself having dinner with Chris. And I've listened to, I also listened to his very long Hunter podcast that I thought was really good, where Chris kind of talked about finding God. And this is where I want to circle back with you on it is, I remember him talking about, and I don't remember what they were, Don, but I remember him, having negative Don Higgins isms, let's say. And there's something that Chris said on that podcast that I probably was just in a season in my life, and my listeners are going to be like, he talks about this every week. It's really on the heart right now. Chris said in that podcast with Hunter guys, and that's been at least a year ago or whenever it was, that we all as hunters, and he's talking about his journey to God and kind of talking about all that trouble that he got in and kind of how he found his faith through it and all these things. And I believe he's on a journey. Like I really do. I'm not going to take up for anything you would have said negatively or anything, but I want to believe, and I hope and pray for all of the people in the industry that this can all be like, but God through all of this, right? I hope for that. What Chris said that resonated so much with me, I had to pull my truck over because I just burst into tears, was he said, when I ask you, why do you hunt, Don? Like, why do you hunt? Why is your life built around this? Why, Chris got in that same line of talking, and he said, I think as hunters, like all of us think that we're out here just hunting a deer and like we're just really entrenched in this deer stuff and we're, doing everything to chase a deer. But what we're actually hunting out there is our soul. We're actually hunting for our soul. And I just so intimately believe that is why God speaks to me so clearly in a tree, so vividly in the outdoors, so crystal clear to me in the silence of nature. The silence can be deafening sometimes. And my thoughts are, and my question for you is, aside from any of the current climate of what your conversations may or may not be, how does that hit you when you hear, I think we're actually hunting for our soul?
Well, it makes sense. Because I can tell you, I've killed more than my fair share of big deer. And when I was younger, the goal was, man, I got to get a 170. And you get a 170 and you're not satisfied. I got to kill a 200. Well, you kill a 200, you're not satisfied. I got to kill another 200. This time I got to do it on video. Well, you do that and you're not satisfied. You're never going to find satisfaction in the deer woods as far as achievements. But in the deer woods is the perfect place to realize your place in creation. You recognize your own mortality, that your days are numbered. And, one of the reasons that I refuse to engage in a battle, if you want to call it that, with Chris is, him and I are very similar in that you can survey 1,000 people about Chris Brackett and 500 are going to love him and 500 are going to hate him. You can ask 1,000 people about me, 500 are going to love me and 500 are going to hate me. We're both very, I don't know what you want to call it.
Prominent names.
Well, but we're also, our personalities are kind of abrasive. Yeah. You either love us or you hate us. It just seems like that we don't ride the fence on issues. And I think a lot of the people that really like me probably really don't like him, and vice versa. I think a lot of people that really like Chris probably don't like me, just because our personalities are so different. But we're both Christians. And the last thing that I wanted to happen was for the hunting industry to see two Christian guys out there butting heads and making, excuse my language, making asses of themselves. Uh-huh. And being the older, I'm a little older than Chris. I thought that it was my place as a Christian. I needed to take the lead and kind of turn the other cheek, because I knew that if Chris and we haven't got together, we've shared text and such, but I just know that if Chris and I ever get together and sit down, we're going to find way more common ground than uncommon. I think
I would agree with that. I really would. And I think it would be great for both of you. And I think it would be, and I'm not in it, but I just sense a journey in him that has been really fun to watch. And I'm positive he's not polished, right? Like I talked to Chris yesterday, he's going to listen to this, I'm sure, but Chris, let's do the podcast. Let's all do the podcast. Let's just go. Don said we're going to his house. I heard it. I agree you'd find more common ground. And what I agree with too, Don, that I wholeheartedly believe God can do if we allow it, is he can take division and just create divinity through it. Because no one's winning if you're divided as two men of faith. And I'm not even claiming to say you two are divided right now. I don't even know the climate, but I knew of the hardships you had. And it was just so, pure to me to hear during his struggle journey. And, I forget what the Hunters guys, labeled that podcast, but the rise and fall of Chris Brackett or whatever they called it, the wordisms that would kind of overshadow this story, hearing him say, like, we're actually hunting for our soul, and this whole 2-hour podcast be about trying to find who he really is. It was just really therapeutic to hear. You know what I mean? It really was. And I don't know. Anyway, there's just blessing that you have seen and I have seen in the world that we just can't think somehow God can orchestrate something beautiful, and he sure can. He just sure can. And so heck, I'll be the host. We'll do let's do a round table. I'll be the host. I'm volunteering here. Let's all get on the same page about switchgrass and miscanthus and all the good things, and then we'll figure out how to be men of God together in the outdoors.
I'm all for it. The older I get, these relationships become way more important, because I don't care if I'm 62, but I could be 92 and still learning. And yep. I can learn. Everybody out there can teach me something. And when I'm at these church events or wherever, speaking events, a lot of times I'll say to the crowd, everyone in this room has something that they do better than everyone else in this room, or there's a topic that they know more about, they're more knowledgeable about than everybody else in this room. We all have something positive to bring to the table, and we can all still learn. You show me someone who thinks they know it all, and I'll show you someone that doesn't know anything at all.
Mm-hmm. For sure. And you lose so much potential in your own journey, especially in your own journey to faith, if you think you've arrived somewhere.
Oh yeah.
When your brain thinks you've arrived, you stop the journey and you're not growing anymore. You're dying. I got a couple areas I'd love to talk with. Maybe this will lighten our mood. Unfortunately, I love our mood, so maybe we just stay here. But I do have questions for you about, as my excitement to expand Illinois. I've been hunting Illinois for 25 years as a non-resident. I've had some of my greatest hunts ever in Illinois, honestly, Don. I really resonate when you talk about Illinois. The words you've said lately that I'm like, ouch, that hurts, but it's true, is I tend to agree that Illinois is kind of riding on its past reputation in general. And I will also say that I think Ohio is too, but we'll get to that in a second. I want to know, Don, because you've kind of said I think you've said you wouldn't have the energy to do this, but if you were, snap on this cap of you were appointed the guy that everybody that matters is going to listen to, and the guy that's going to right the ship, and the guy that's going to tell us how to do this right and seek for quality over quantity and kind of turn the ship in the right direction. If you just had all the resources, you had everybody on board, can you give me what would be your cheat sheet to how do you make Illinois great again?
Well, you're not going to like number one, but we got to limit non-residents.
I'm okay with it. Now, I want to dive deep on that. I'm great with it. Here's the question I want to ask you, because I'm really interested in this, because I'm a non-resident there. And in Ohio, I was a non-resident for 20 years. I lived in West Virginia, Don, moved to Ohio 3 years ago, but I was hunting Ohio for 20 plus years as a non-resident. Here's the question I have, because I think, agree with you. Staying on Illinois for this whole talk track, do you differentiate a non-resident landowner versus just a non-resident?
Well, that's a slippery slope. And
I know. That's why I'm curious, because I make the argument, Don, and I'll say this and shut up. The non-resident landowners, to me, you tell me I'm wrong, how many consults are you going on to non-resident landowners, just for sake of example, in states where the non-resident landowner is the guy putting in habitat, the non-resident landowner is the guy spending money on making his farms better? So I tried to say, listen, I'm not, because, I had a guy come up to me at a real estate event. He's like, dude, stop talking about non-residents. So I was like, whoa. I think there's a difference in the non-resident landowner versus just the guy that's going on an outfitted hunt. He's a non-resident. He gets a tag. What's your take?
Well, you make a great point. and there's no easy answer. And, people think that I'm anti non-resident. I'm not. I've been a non-resident in many states, and I've had many non-resident hunters come to Illinois and hunt with me. So I'm not against non-residents. I'll be applying for an Iowa non-resident tag here in a couple weeks. So
thank you for the reminder. I need another preference point.
Yeah, that's probably all I'm going to get, is a preference point. But
I have 6, Don, and I have 6, and I'm now told I might not even draw on 6, so I'm going to get a 7
on the unit. But
yeah, carry on.
Here's what I don't like about your argument, and you make a very valid argument, because a non-resident landowner is someone who is serious about habitat work. They're serious about the management of the deer herd. And for the most part, their property is going to be almost like a nursery for young bucks that all the surrounding neighbors are going to benefit from. But the big issue I have with it is that turns hunting into a rich man's sport. And back when I was a kid, if I would have grown up in this era, today's era, I don't think I could have ever I could have never had the experiences. I could have probably never ended up where I am today, making my living, through the hunting industry and the hunting world. And I remember what it's like to be that kid. And I don't want to shut the door on those kids that did not have money. So it's a double-edged sword that being brutally honest, I don't have the answer for it, because is it fair that we shut out the poor people so that the rich man can have all the non-resident tags? And
well, let's dive deeper to a practicality on that, because I want to make sure I'm understanding you, because in my thought process of the words you're using, if we're shutting out a poor person, and I know what you mean by that, but like are they buying a non-resident tag to come hunt in Illinois if they're poor? Because to me, the poor is the resident. If we're going to make the resident kid grew up there, if access is at an all-time low, I'm thinking you mean it makes it harder for the local young boy to be mentored in hunting if ground is bought up by rich people. Is that?
Well, that's part of it too. But there are plenty of guys that have to save up to buy their non-resident Illinois tag. They don't just have the money in their bank at any time where they can go buy that tag. They save up for a year or more. Maybe they put $20 a week from their paycheck into a jar or whatever to save up for that tag. And then they get to go to Illinois every 2 or 3 years or whatever when they have enough money.
Yep.
They're not really poor, poor was probably a poor word choice on my part.
I know what you mean. We're just talking about almost an avatar. We're painting a picture, and it's because, Don, it's fair to use the word poor if we're going to use the word rich guys, because I know what you mean, and you've said it, and I agree with it, and I said it on my own podcast. Unfortunately, the hunting world has already become a rich man's sport, and people crucify me on the social reels about it. It has become a rich man's sport. It really has. So I guess pretend I don't have an opinion, Don. If we limit the non-residents, because I know you've got to look at it's like disciplining a teenager. Like, they may not think they need it, but they do, and they don't know that they do. We don't self-govern ourselves as hunters well, right? So what do you mean if we're going to limit non-residents? What do you mean, especially if you're saying you're not going to make that term mutually exclusive or non-exclusive to a landowner non-resident? If we're just limiting them in general, is that just because you believe that non-resident in Illinois is, I don't know what percentage of total harvest or tag sales it is? Is it an overwhelming majority?
Well, I have no idea. But, I can tell you that if you look at Iowa and Illinois, go to an atlas, go to Google, whatever, look at the square miles, the land mass of Iowa and Illinois, and they're almost identical. And then look at the number of resident hunters. Illinois just blows away Iowa in the number of resident hunters. So you've got more residents in the same square miles. And then you look at the non-residents. Well, Illinois will have at least 3+ times the number of non-residents as Iowa has. And actually, Illinois is the fallback state. People apply to Iowa, and the years they don't get drawn, they just go to Illinois and they go to Walmart and buy a tag. So if you were to limit non-residents in Illinois, what do you do with the guys that already own land here? Do you all of a sudden say, well, you've got to start drawing a tag, and some years you're not going to get to come hunt your own land? I mean,
well, and Don, you use Iowa as an example, because if we're going to say, and I will agree with you, Iowa is I think you would still say Iowa is the pedigree or the poster child of what to shoot for. I know guys right now, friends of mine that own ground in Iowa with other guys that aren't residents in Iowa, right? They own ground together, and they are on almost a rotation where your family gets to hunt this year because you drew, and they get it. And like my mind was like, bro, that's crazy. That's insane that you do that. But he's like, well, if I get 2 preference points, I can go late muzzleloader hunt and still get the benefit. But how many times in your life are you going to get to go hunt a 170 plus deer? And I'm going to get to do it more here. So making the argument, if I'm hearing you, Don, that even if we did limit non-residents and you're, only going to hunt Illinois every 3 years now, or every 2, let's just say as a stepping stone, to a 6-year window like Iowa, people are still doing that. But I guess help me and the listener here. If I have this correctly, what the current law is in Illinois is, if I'm a landowner, I think you have to own 40 acres to get a guaranteed tag. Is it 40 if you're a non-resident landowner?
Mm-hmm.
So tell me your opinion on that. Do you love, hate it? What's your thoughts on that?
Well,
and maybe it's to get a second tag. Am I saying that wrong?
No, you got to own 40 acres to get a landowner tag.
Okay.
Anybody can go to Walmart and buy a tag. And I think this year was the first year they sold out, but they didn't sell out until like in December or January. And
yep.
And they'll raise the limit next year because they sold out. Illinois is the most mismanaged, politically incorrect state in the world. I mean, we give California and New York a run for the money. And all they care about is the dollar. So I don't see them ever limiting non-residents. I know I'm not going to spend a minute of my time pushing for it, but the challenge or the hurdle that I have a hard time getting over is the fact that we're turning it in. And you already mentioned, it's already a rich man's game, but because I was that poor kid.
Yeah.
I was that poor kid. And to be honest, hunting probably kept me out of trouble. Might have even kept me out of jail. I don't know.
Me 100%. Me 100% kept me out of trouble.
So when we start limiting, the price goes up. The price goes up for everything when you start limiting.
Let's use it this way, Don. What do you think Iowa in this argument? Do you think Iowa gets it right?
Well, I think Iowa, there's things they could do better. I think there's a lot of things they're doing way better than Illinois, but I think the fact that there's people in Iowa, a landowner in Iowa can shoot $3. I don't agree with that whatsoever.
I had Skip Sly on a while back, and he kind of rattled off, and you may already knew this, Don. Like it was mind-boggling to me. I think he said Iowa. I'm going to miss the number. Someone go back and fact check me. Is like 7% forested now. Or like 13% forested or something. And he's like talking about the number of people in that area, of how little forested ground there is compared to like Ohio. We were talking about, the difference in Ohio and how much better it could be.
Skip's a great guy, and he's a smart guy and knows a lot about deer and managing deer and killing big deer. But his ideas for Iowa, I could blow him a lot of them out of the water. And he thinks that you can go to any state and you can legislate change. And I'll challenge him. You come to Illinois and try to legislate change, because I did it for over 20 years. I testified in front of Barack Obama whenever he was a state senator. I've been doing it. And you know what we accomplished in 20 years of trying? Zero. Absolutely nothing. Anything we asked for, it was all the Farm Bureau and the insurance lobby got whatever they wanted. If Skip thinks he can change states, he may be able to change Iowa. And the Iowa bow hunters are way better organized than Illinois. Illinois is an absolute disaster, one end to the other. Skip throws out those figures, but a white-tailed deer is not a forest animal. He's an edge animal. He's living in the farmland. He's living in waterways. He's living in CRP fields. Yeah. So Skip's argument could be blown out of the water. How's he going to account for the fact that with the same land mass, Illinois has more than double the number of resident hunters?
Why do you think that is, Don? I'm interested in that.
Look at the population of Iowa versus the population of Illinois. And the percentage of hunters is probably the same, but we've got such a bigger population. We've got more population centers, more towns. Yeah, he does make some very valid points. And again,
I'm Googling this while we're talking.
I've got total respect for Skip. I don't want this to come across like he doesn't know what he's talking about, because he makes some very great points. But there are some other things there could be some pushback on some of the things he says too.
Yeah, here's your number, Don. It says, this is Google, everybody. Illinois has an estimated population of 12.7 million people, while Iowa has approximately 3.24.
Yeah, so we got four
times
the number of people on the same land mass. And I don't know if Google will tell you the number of resident deer hunters for those two states, but
yeah, I'm sure
it blows them away. There was a time a few years back where I had all the data. I was like, what Skip is today for Iowa, I was that person for Illinois for a number of years until I finally threw my hands up in the air and I said, you know what? I just need to focus my efforts on Don and doing what I can for my own efforts, because it's a lost cause after 20 years. And total respect for Skip for taking the ball and running with it and trying to improve the situation, because that's exactly what I did for a number of years.
I got your Google. Illinois has a higher total number of deer hunters, parentheses, around 300 to 550,000, which that's a huge swing. Yeah. That's funny. They can't even quantify that. 300 to 550 compared to Iowa, which has approximately 166 to 218.
So we got at least double the number of deer hunters, resident deer hunters. Well, then you throw in the non-resident hunters, and we got triple the non-resident hunters that Iowa has.
So how do you, though, Don, because this is going to be an interesting tie for me, and if I'm messing your thought process up, just pause the question. But you're going to put yourself in a hot seat if we limit non-resident landowners in Illinois. Now they're mad at Don, and you can't win. So let's just throw that out. You can't win no matter what. But now they're mad at Don because they're not going to hire you to do a consult because they can't hunt their farm every 3 years because now there's more restriction. Does that not kind of you live within the ethos of diehard deer hunters. So does this kind of not put the crosshairs on them, I would think?
Oh, it does to some degree. I mean, I've got people right now posting that Don hates non-resident hunters, which is absolutely not true whatsoever. I think the reasonable person is going to look at the big picture. And, at this point in my life, I've got nothing to gain one way or the other, because I don't know how many deer seasons I've got left. And to be honest, I'm more about the habitat work today than I am to killing the deer. So I could retire today and not make another penny and I'll be fine.
But if we circle back to what you think, how you would limit non-residents, let's just stay at the top, 10,000 foot view. Here's the bullet points. You would limit non-resident tag sales in Illinois. What would you limit it to? I mean, if you could quantify it, because I'm trying to Google now. I had all this for Ohio, but how many non-resident tags were sold in Illinois last year? I don't know. Ohio was 35,000, which to me sounded like a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot. 35,000. So I have the same argument in Ohio. We can just walk into Walmart, like you said. You can buy a tag. The best part, you can throw bait out and you're in the sticks. And I when you make the access that easy, the bar gets lower and lower and lower to what greatness looks like to me. So,
yeah, to come up with an exact number, I really don't know, because I honestly give up on the whole management of the Illinois deer herd many years ago, because we just got nowhere. I have been more focused on my own personal efforts, making my farm the best it can be, adding acreage as I can afford it. And I figure that on my farm, I can manage it the way I want. The state makes laws that I've got to follow, but they can make it unlimited buck hunting, and I'm still going to manage my farm the way I'm going to manage it. I'm going to have to do it within the seasons they set. Yeah, I'm going to be legal, but I just don't have the number.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have it here either. I don't know that I trust this data, but Google says that approximately 10% of the total permits sold last year in Illinois in 25 were non-resident. Would you find that low or high, or maybe accurate?
10%.
Yep. That's what it says. Non-residents often account for approximately 10% of total permits, and that's archerytrade.org. But
for me, it would just be a guess. For me,
I'm going to just see if I can get it.
I would say it's at least 10%.
Okay. So I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate again. If 90% of the load is a resident, what do you think about other things like going to one buck or going, all the things that, we both probably know won't ever happen, but removing crossbows, making them have a season, all these things. You would at least agree, I hope, that what I think Illinois gets right that I really like as a resident of Ohio is there's no baiting. I think they could modify that to supplemental feeding off outside seasons and minerals and all that for sure. But the no baiting thing to me is my favorite reason to go to Illinois, is I don't have to worry about the corn pile across the fence from the neighbor.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that. I would never want baiting to be legal in Illinois. I would like to see supplemental feeding outside of season. And the reason for that is if you open up baiting, it just becomes a free for all. It's who's got the biggest corn pile. And I just don't like it whatsoever. What supplemental feeding though, it's anybody that's supplemental feeding outside of season is probably not just dumping a corn pile out. They're probably have a balanced ration, with the correct levels of protein and vitamins, minerals, and all that. They're literally helping the deer herd.
Yep.
And
I've got your concentrate mix. It's probably getting mixed up as we speak and going into the feeders because that's exactly what I want to be doing right now, forcing them to eat mineral. So
supplemental feeding is a totally different animal than baiting. And I'm totally against baiting, but I'm totally for supplemental feeding. And if we want to go down this rabbit hole a little bit, the big knock on supplemental feeding is that it spreads disease. Well, I think there's as much data to support the idea that supplemental feeding a proper ration probably makes for a healthier deer herd than it does creates any sort of disease issues. I'll just leave it at that. We could go down that rabbit hole for the rest of the podcast.
No, I tend to agree with you for sure. And I had Zach Hossel in a while back with Defense. And got to say, I was really, really surprised, educated. I don't know what your stance is on his product, but, I didn't know that aquatic biologists are a word. I mean, I'm sure I knew that probably existed, but to know that a guy has an aquatic biology degree, studies animals to the degree that he did, and then talks about the process and the product of keeping water safe for deer and how to have, ideal water holes. I mean, the whole time I'm like, this makes sense. Like, this makes sense on how to, you have a big enough farm. I don't know the practicality of it, but I do tend to think he makes a point. If you haven't ever checked into it, Don, I really think he makes a valid point that deer prefer, the premium food sources, and he will argue, and I tend to agree with him, they prefer premium water sources as well. They tend to know where these are. And it was just fun. I'll send you a link if you've not already kind of studied some of his things. I'm going to be trying this out with this Defense type treatment. But really, Don, the thing that I took away from it, if you don't even buy his product, the thing I took away that I think was backwards thinking from everything I ever thought was minerals in water is bad. Like is not like they do not want minerals in the water because that's what promotes aquatic wildlife or, aquatic vegetation, all these things, which then promotes hatching and promotes, you know what I mean? The bugs and all. And then you start going down this road of that's where you have the problems. And they like he doesn't love a pond that's spring fed if it's a really, really, heavy mineral water because of the problems of that. He wants kind of zero, mineral neutral, if you will, water. And I don't know. It was really, informing to me of what I spend a lot, and I know you do as well, a lot of time on nutrition and having quality food sources. And it's just like, we have water holes. Like we put them in, you put them in. I have a water hole. Life's good. But he keeps saying, like, if you put as much time into the water hole as you do as the food, like he even said, like not having fertilizer come into the water hole, like when you're spraying or, you're fertilizing clover or fertilizing corn or whatever, not having that go into a pond because it's creating a nutrient rich water that promotes growth, that promotes problem. You follow me? I'm probably butchering it.
Well, I'm familiar with the product, but I'm not educated on the product. So I'm not bashing the product in any way whatsoever. I've gone to using water tanks, livestock water tanks on my farm, and I do not bury them. They stay on top of the ground.
That was a big part of his thing is you've got to be able to have water sources you can control and treat.
Yep.
If you're going to treat a 15-acre lake, you can do it, but it's going to cost you 15 times more than that's where his argument of these premium water sources where they know this water. They know where it is. And he said, like, the deer will prefer your water hole over a neighbor's if you've got what they want. And I just tend to agree with it. It was really eye-opening. I'm going to be testing some of it out. You ought to check it out. Seriously, there's a lot more to him you know how in this industry you see someone, I thought of an idea and here's a product and it's not worth a nickel.
Right.
And I'll be honest, going into it, I was like, maybe this is an exploiting opportunity for what all of us have, fear mongering, over EHD. And being in Southeastern Ohio, we had a rather large outbreak. So we're all, really raw right now. There's a lot of thought process behind his systems. And I really do think it's legit. I really do. Zach Haas, shout out to Zach. If you want to reach out to him, and he does a ton of consults and things about his product, but it's like a 3-step process on how to treat your water holes. And he makes a kit where it's simple and easy. And this is step 1. He's sending you, I'm going to butcher this so bad, but like he's sending you, what's the word? He's sending you a kit that has, probiotics or whatever it is in it. Like it's live, it's active. So it's kind of I would equate it, Don, in your world to like a Miscanthus where you just can't, I'll buy 5 kits and call it a day. Like they have a shelf life. Like these have a shelf life of when they need to be put out. And it was pretty eye opening. His is like a year, but I told Janice earlier, I'm not ordering Miscanthus this year, Janice, because I don't have a place to store it. And I also can't get it in the ground fast enough. So I'm going to skip a year here with farm sales. But I sidebarred us. Get back to the top here. We started on non-residents. I don't know if we can come to what would your conclusive thoughts be on, but I would think it's Illinois limit non-residents. What else do you throw into how to make it better?
Well, the challenge in Illinois right now, or the reason Illinois deer herders went down the toilet. And you ask anyone that's my age, especially, we've seen the heyday of the Illinois deer herd back around the turn of the century, back around the year 2000, and up to like 2004. And I'm telling you, I used to have the data for all of this year to year data. And I think it was about 2004, 2005, Illinois went on a deer eradication campaign, I'll call it, where they just wanted to hammer the herd back. And you can look at the annual harvest data, and you can see when that peak was around 04, 05, and it fell off after that. Well, the issue with Illinois is not the number of deer. They could manage the herd for whatever number they wanted. But the issue is the way they went about it. And you got to have So they never addressed sex ratios and age structure. It was just kill deer. And we've got to get more of our bucks to older age classes. And right now we've done everything we can as a state to put more and more and more pressure on the bucks. And people say, well, a 1 buck limit would solve that. Well, no, it wouldn't. I don't believe, because I think you enact a 1 buck limit, and a 1 buck limit works. Don't get me wrong.
I was going to say it would have to help. I mean, it would have to help.
It would help, but in Illinois, without a non-resident limit, you're going to the better you make your herd, the more people are going to come, and you're going to offset any gains you make with a 1 buck limit. You're going to offset them with no non-resident limit. The two have to go hand in hand. And you can ask Skip, would he be for a 1 buck limit in Iowa if it meant opening up the non-resident limit like Illinois has? No, he's not going to go for that. He knows a 1 buck limit would do wonders in Iowa because they got the non-resident limit. In Illinois, it's going to be just the opposite. The better you make your herd, the more outside pressure you're going to bring in, and one is going to negate the other.
Yeah, I think that's a strong argument. What else do you think? I've heard some of your takes, but I'm giving you the freedom to say them.
I think the supplemental feeding outside of season is a huge thing, and the reason for it. So right now, the legislature just about a year or so ago, they really liberalized the nuisance tags that farmers and landowners can get just to freely shoot deer and let them lay and rot at all times of the year. So supplemental feeding would do two things for the farmers. Number one, if a deer's got his head in a feeder eating, he's not eating out in the field. Mm-hmm. And number two, the feed that's in that feeder is a farm commodity. The farmer harvests that corn, soybeans, whatever that goes into that feed. He's been paid for it. So instead of a deer out there hurting the yield in an ag field, he's got his head in a feeder eating feed that the farmer's been paid for. So I think that's a regulation that the Farm Bureau should just jump on in the state of Illinois, because it's a win-win for everybody. It helps the farmer, it helps the deer herd. That's a huge one. I think the last straw for the Illinois deer herd that really, and there's going to be a lot of people not like this, but when we legalized crossbows for everyone during the entire archery season, that was the last straw. And a buck just has so much harder time surviving now to 4 or 5 years old, because the pressure that we used to have for a 6-7 day gun season, we now have that pressure for a 3.5 month archery season. You literally can drive around. When I was younger, I became strictly a bow hunter in my early 20s, gave up gun hunting way back then. And what I would do during gun season, it wasn't legal to archery hunt during gun season. So during gun season, I would just get in my truck and I would at daylight and I'd drive the countryside and I'd see where the hunters were at and I'd see if I could see any deer or whatever. And there were trucks parked everywhere on opening day, and basically every day of gun season, you could drive around every morning and every afternoon, and there were trucks parked everywhere. You'd look across the fields, you'd see orange hunters everywhere. Today, I can drive that same route where I would used to see 30 trucks and see 2 or 3. But you can drive around a Saturday in November during archery season, and you will see more trucks parked than you will during gun season. And what's happened when they legalized crossbows, a lot of gun hunters became bow hunters. If you want to call them that. And I am all for a crossbow for anyone who has physical limits.
Yep.
I'm not for keeping people out of the woods. If a person needs a crossbow to be able to participate, that's one thing. But for, a 20-year-old guy that's 6'2" and 220 pounds shooting a crossbow, that guy is very capable of shooting a bow. And during archery season was not made as a management tool. We've got to the point in Illinois where the crossbow harvest has surpassed the compound and traditional harvest.
Yep.
And that has absolutely decimated the age structure of our deer herds. And, they try to manage the deer herd as if they were managing ducks or rabbits or anything else. They need to structure things so that they're targeting more antlerless deer, and putting less pressure on the antlered deer. And we're not doing that. One thing I would like to see is a split buck season. So you could still kill 2 bucks, but we would start, your first buck had to be killed during the early season. And the early season would be October 1 when archery starts through the end of the first gun season in mid-November. So if you shot an archery buck in October, you could not shoot a buck during that first gun season as well. You've got your early season buck. And then after that first gun season, we would start the late season where you could kill a second buck. But before you could kill that second buck, you would have to tag at least 1 doe. So
and how do we, this was what I was going to ask you, Don, because I'm a big proponent of the earn a buck tag as well. How do you monitor an earn a buck tag anymore? Because everybody pokes holes in that, and guys will just buy a tag for a doe, magically say they shot it, and move on, and lie. How do you monitor that?
Well, I think you almost need to get back to the check stations, and
I miss the check stations anyway, so I'm for that as well.
I think most hunters do. Most honest hunters do. The outlaws, it's one of their favorite tools.
Yep.
Really.
You mean because they don't have to check anything? They just fill
Yeah.
out an on. Yeah, they just call it in and it's done.
Yeah, call in and say, I shot a doe tonight, and here's the info, and they didn't really shoot one, and boom, they're shooting their second buck. But here's the thing. A buck is much harder to kill in that late season than he is in that early season. And also the hunters, a lot of hunters are not as serious as you and I. And by the time that second gun season is over,
they're tired.
They're done hunting. I mean, they don't care
They're
anymore.
back to work, out of vacation, whatever it is. How do you monitor the earn a buck, though? Do you think it's just instituting a check station? Is that what you think?
Well, I don't see any other way. It's got to be.
So let me ask this, because I'm thinking through this with you. I like this thinking. Let's say we have the digital check and we have a check station, right? We have both. But to do the earn a buck, to harvest your doe, you have to take it to a physical check station. You can't call in a doe tag, let's call it.
Yep. But then, if there's a will to cheat, there's going to be a way to cheat. And what will happen is, a guy shoots a doe, he takes it in, checks it in, he comes home, cuts his tag off, his buddy puts his tag on it, and he goes and checks that same doe in, and, on and on. And that one doe results in 5 people getting a second buck tag.
But there, and I think you would agree with me. We want to believe, and we do believe, there's enough good people in the hunting industry that they would be disgruntled. Let's say you're the guy that's like, I want to shoot my second buck in the 5th of November because I killed one the 23rd October.
Yeah.
Okay, have your argument, but hear what we're trying to do, which is protect the resource, not you. Okay, you came into hunting because the resource was good. Now you don't worry about the resource, you worry about you. So if we get, all right, get over ourselves. I'm going to go check the doe. Like, I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to go check the doe, and I'm going to post it on social media and get my own self, patriotism here. And then I'm going to go hunt my next buck. Like, you want to believe enough guys will just follow the rules and do it, wouldn't you?
Well, yeah, I think most people are pretty honest. But the thing of it is, game laws are viewed different by the general public than other laws. And, it's okay to put my wife's tag on this deer. No big deal. I mean, I'm talking guys that you'll see in church, elders at the church, don't think nothing about bending or breaking game laws. They wouldn't speed. They wouldn't go over 55 mile an hour on the highway for anything, but it's no big deal to put wife's tag on a deer. It's just they look at game laws different, and it'd be a real challenge. I mean, I've been through the war, and the other thing is deer hunters, and especially Illinois deer. And the crazy thing is, I've been out there enough in the hunting world, and different states seem to have different cultures, deer hunting cultures. For example, somebody can make a comment on one of my posts on social media, a negative comment, and I will know that person's from Michigan. I click on their link or their profile. Yep, he's from Michigan. Michigan people have their own culture. Pennsylvania people have their own culture. Mm-hmm. Illinois people have their own culture, deer hunting culture, good or bad otherwise. And
Ohio sure does as well.
Yeah. So, to break a culture, I've talked about with folks about the whole Ohio baiting situation that's gone on for decades. It'll take 2 generations of people to break that. If they change the law today in Iowa and said you can't bait anymore, I promise you there's going to be corn piles all over Iowa this fall. The guys that are my age that have been doing it for decades, you're not going to get them to stop.
You mean Ohio?
But Ohio.
Yeah,
sorry.
Yeah,
Ohio.
I'm with you.
And it's going to take the younger generation is going to have to grow up and teach their kids. And it's going to take 2 generations of people to totally change that culture. And in Illinois, we've created a culture. I mean, the guys that today are 50 years old, they have no idea about how this deer herd came about. When I was a kid, there was no deer. If you seen a deer track and told somebody, they thought you was lying. And when I shot my first deer, I was 16 years old. I only knew of 3 people that had shot a deer. Each one was a guy my dad's age, roughly. And each one had shot 1 deer. 2 of the guys had shot a doe, and one of the guys had shot a yearling buck. And that was the only people I knew on the entire planet that had shot a deer, and each one had shot 1 deer. And I watched the deer herd come from nothing to what it was at the peak, and I've seen what destroyed it. And guys that are 50 years old even, they weren't there back in the day when there were no deer. They can't appreciate this resource because they don't remember the day when there was none. And as every year goes by, there's fewer and fewer guys in my generation that's seen this deer herd happen, that there's fewer and fewer of us that really appreciate it. And I'm not saying the younger guys don't appreciate it. Don't take that wrong. But we seen it. We seen it when we lived it when there was no deer.
Yeah, and the younger can't carry the depth of what it's come from. They can only see what it came to. So, And
we've seen the glory days, and we know what built the glory days. And, I've got a PowerPoint presentation about this. If we'd have had this conversation 15 years ago, I'm telling you what, I would have been throwing out data like Skip Sly does in Iowa. And
I think I would agree with you because my beginning hunts in Illinois in like 2000 – I probably missed the curve by a minute. I was probably 2007, first time I came to Illinois. When would you have argued was the peak of Illinois?
2004, 2005, somewhere in there.
Okay.
But I had the data for every year before that and after that. Not every year, but about, a few years each side. And the data from the Illinois Deer Classic with the number of Boone and Crockett bucks brought in, it peaked when the deer herd peaked. And then when they started just going nuts with liberal regulations, it tanked. And I mean, it went from having like 70 booners brought into the Classic to having like single digits.
Yep.
That's how far it tanked. And the regulation changes were never done with the idea of a quality deer herd. It was numbers. All they cared about was numbers. And the sad thing is that the Illinois deer herd was built back in the 50s and 60s by a couple of biologists, Frosty Loomis and Jack Calhoun. You can do a search on them. Some of the regulations that are very common today throughout the whole United States started in Illinois. Illinois was the first state that had either sex hunting for deer. All the other states were bottom.
That's wild.
The other thing Illinois did right out of the gate, and these 2 biologists are responsible. The other thing they did out of the gate was they micromanaged by county. All other states had statewide regulations. and Illinois regulated by county. And those two things originated in Illinois, and it created the best deer herd on the planet. I'm telling you, back in 2000, Illinois blew away Iowa in terms of quality of deer. It wasn't even close. I asked guys like Tim Walmsley that were official measures for Boone and Crockett. Illinois was head and shoulders above Iowa, and we absolutely destroyed the herd. And to be honest, Iowa has gotten a little better than they were back in the day, but the change was not Iowa getting so much better they blew Illinois away. It was Illinois just falling, crashing to the bottom because of poor regulations. And Illinois deer hunters are such a opinionated and I'll just leave it at opinionated lot.
Well, I see all this same kind of sentiment in Ohio, having moved here and just kind of getting entrenched. I mean, you go on this baiting argument, man, you'll have guys blue in the face on both sides.
Right.
And, you know, the guys that are blue in the face about, I had a recent guest, you know, it would be so selfish to take baiting away from hunters here in Ohio. And it's like, that's pretty bold, because I think it's pretty selfish to only want to have your bait so you can hunt 4-acre tracts in Columbus and rip big bucks off of them, because if you lose the bait, it completely changes how you do it. Yep. That's selfish to a deer herd. That is selfish to a resource to try and exploit it. And listen, the last 2 hunts that I have, they're going to come out from Ohio, are deer killed over bait. There's nothing I can hide. I've said it. I'll be the first guy to sign and remove it. Both the last 2 hunts that I've killed deer are with bait in a food plot, pulling a deer to a corner where a stand is and killing them, because they're farms that weren't set up or farms that are permission, you know, and you go in and you make a change relative to that. Take it away from me and I will be so happy. I have no problem changing how we think, but I do it because you do it. You know what I mean? To the neighbor, to everyone. I'm doing it because you do it. If you would quit, I would quit, but no one will quit. So it's just, we have the same kind of division here in Ohio. Don, I want to ask you one more question. I've had so much fun here and there's more I could ask, but the one I really want to I've got 2, but I'm going to turn this into one question. You've got a Real World Wildlife Product shirt on, and I happen to love Real World Wildlife Products. I'm a user for products. I love everything about it. But my curiosity, and I think I know some of these answers, but I want to hear from you. Why did you create Real World? Just why?
Well, there's quite a story to that too. So back in the day, early 2000s, I started and was part of a video group. You know, when the hunting videos were a big deal, you go to a trade show and every other booth was some group selling hunting videos. You'd go to the convenience store and there'd be hunting videos for sale there on the counter. I was part of a group, actually started the group called the Real World Whitetails. And we put out videos for, I don't know, 3 or 4 or 5 years, something like that. Every group was looking to be different than the other groups producing these videos. And 3 of the 5 of us in the group were landowners. And, we had hunting property, planting food plots and such. And what we did different was that a lot of our hunts on our videos were submitted. Besides our own hunts, we had submitted hunts that anybody could film their hunt, submit it to us. And each year we would select a grand prize winner. And we had all these sponsors. It was really easy to get sponsors back in this day. So, we had like Matthews Archery. We had Lone Wolf Tree Stands and Vortex Optics and all this. So these companies would give us product and we would pick a grand prize winner, and then we would show up at their house unannounced like Publishers Clearinghouse. Congratulations, you won this year's Real World Whitetails Video Challenge or whatever we called it. I don't remember now, and we would give them all, here's your new Matthews bow, here's your new Lone Wolf Tree Stand, here's your Vortex Optics, and we'd drop thousands of dollars worth of gear on these people. Well, with three of us owning hunting property, we got the idea that we would reach out to all these food plot seed companies in business at that time. And we would ask for free seed. And back in those days, it was easy to get free product. Every company was just handing it out by the truckloads. Totally different than today. And our idea was that you send us your seed. We're going to plant it on our farms. We're going to plant it side by side with all these other brands. We're going to video over it, and we're going to show the viewer what the deer prefer. And I mean, every company that was in business at that time, and it wasn't near as many as there is today, but there was about several of them. The most interesting thing happened is that every company replied, and every reply we got was exactly the same. Every company was willing to send us free seed to plant on our farms, but not if we was going to plant it next to the competition. And it's like a light bulb went off. I was like, why are they all afraid of each other? Well, being a farm boy, I started digging into the analysis tags on these different products and found out some of the things that these companies were doing. You know, they were using old seed, leftover seed from the ag industry that had poor germination rates. They were using cheap fillers, cheap filler seeds like ryegrass, which is way cheaper than some of the better seeds. They was using excess seed coating and things like that. They was doing anything they could to increase their profit margin in these bags. And so, you know, a light bulb went off with me, and I thought, well, hey, if these people are afraid to be planted next to the competition, let's start a seed company and let's have the Dare to Compare challenge. If you go way back, you know, we was using the Dare to Compare challenge from day one. We wanted people to plant ours next to the others. And we went to a local ag seed company that had the facility, had the equipment, had the licensing to produce this seed. And we basically, I say we, I'm the one that did it, and went and met with them. And we got them on board with helping us start this new company based solely on quality, not profit margin. So the other thing we did different was we gave people more seed per acre, and still do to this day. You go out there today, and I don't think that there's another company like clover, for example. Most companies are giving you 7 or 8 pounds of seed to plant an acre of clover. We're giving you 10 pounds. Our clover has less coating, so we're giving you more seed there. We're not using annuals. A lot of those are using annual clovers because they're cheaper and they grow the first year, but after that you're left with a plot with bare spots because the annual clovers didn't come back. So we based it 100% on quality, and started in 2008. So we've been at it a while now, and every year we have grown significantly, really. And I mean, that's kind of the story. Today we got about 400 dealers across the country. You can go to our website and find a dealer near you. Always looking for new dealers as well. We also sell online for those folks that don't have a dealer nearby. But everything has been based on quality and results, and profit margin was not even factored in. And sometimes our products are going to be more expensive than the competition. But when you boil it down and you look at why, you look at germination rates and what you're actually getting, you're actually paying less per pound. And there's other companies that are using other marketing tactics, plain packaging, for example, just clear bags and saying this and that. But when you compare products and you boil it down to price per pound of actual seed you're getting, look at germination rates to get pure live seed, we can stand with anybody out there, and the results are just head and shoulders above it. And we continue to grow. I mean, our sales this year are up another 10%. So far, I think our customer retention from year to year is probably the best in the industry, because people plant it. It works. It does what we say, and it'll do it better than the competition. So it's just a different approach that we took. The Dare to Compare. I know that there's a lot of other seed companies and nutrition companies that have kind of copied that today. It's not near as bad as it was when we started, years ago. But just extremely blessed that God opened that door and continues to open doors for us there. That we're just trying to put out the best products we possibly can.
I kind of had remembered the dare to compare. I remember those words and seeing that, but I hadn't heard the story kind of in that way. The one word that comes to mind, Don, when I started reading the seed tags as well, I'm not super analytical, but I started to get frustration with the results. You work hard and you do all these things, and then you try to do everything right, and then you don't get a good stand, or like you said, the next year it's non-existent. There's a word I started seeing on these seed tags I didn't like, and it said inert matter. Mm-hmm. And if you don't know what inert matter is, my friends listening, go Google it. But Don, what is inert matter?
Well, it can be anything. It can be dirt, dust. Sometimes they will even put seed coating under inert matter. But there was products out there that were actually 50% seed coating. You buy a 5 pound or a 10 pound bag, and 5 pounds of that bag was not even seed. It was seed coating, because the coating is cheaper than the seed.
Yep.
And that was just one of the many tricks. And it's not near as bad as it was back in the day when we started. There's still some of it going on, especially among the bigger players. I can tell you that if a product, there's a lot of people are not going to like this, but it's the absolute truth. If a seed product is being handled in big box stores, there is a huge margin there, because a big box store will not take it unless there is a huge margin for them. And the company's also making a margin. We don't have a big box store that we sell in. We've got the Shields in Springfield, which would be the closest thing. And it's only because of a relationship with that one store. They've come to us for it. And our profit margins are I'm sure not where they like, but it's all about quality and the end user for us, because I was the end user when we started. I still am today, but we want the end user to have success. Customer service is the other thing. You mentioned Janice and coming in. I don't know if we were recording yet, but you mentioned her.
Yeah, she came into Janice's. There's Janice and Carrie, and now Corey, and I don't keep track of all the names, but Janice and Carrie kind of run the show there in the front office. When you call, there's a good chance you're going to get one of them. But yeah, Janice met me at 10 p.m. I tell people this, I did a Facebook story about it, but coming back from Illinois, trying to get plots in, doing the stuff Don's doing. We're all chasing rain, headed back to Ohio. I think I had a breakdown or something on a farm, and I kept telling Janice, giving her updates. Hey, I'm really, really sorry. I'm going to be running later. It's 10 p.m. Here's Janice in her pajamas meeting me, driving the forklift to help me load my seed order. Will not take any cash money as a thank you for doing what you're doing. But that's the type of people you have. And I said in my video, Don, go find, and I'll, bash whomever, but I'll go ask Evolved Harvest to meet you at 10 p.m. to get your order. Go ask Whitetail Institute to meet you at 10 p.m. to pick your order up. Not saying Janice is going to do this every time, everybody. Not suggesting that. But the point is, everything's built on relationship. It really is. Everything is. And what I love, Don, about Real World, there's a lot, but I love that you have, to me, the most holistic line of products, all the way from, as we sit here and talk, you've got an annual screen now, switchgrass, miscanthus, minerals, seed corn, feed corn, soybeans, different blends of soybeans, all the fall food plot seed, your small seed, your big seed, your cereal grains. We could just keep going. If there's a product, and this is what I love about Real World, if there's a product that has a space in the habitat place, you will have it, or you will research it, and you will work on it, and you guys will test it. And so for me, it's as if quality wasn't a big deal. It's always been a no-brainer for me that I want to go to one company and get everything I need. I want everything from one place, because that to me is the most holistic approach to having cohesiveness amongst what you're doing on your property. And that's just why I love Real World. I hadn't heard the version of, these seed companies not wanting you to be planted beside of them. It makes total sense. And we talked about this earlier, maybe offline, maybe on this one, but just there's a lot of toxicity in the hunting industry. And I know it's in every industry, But I had to unfortunately see that there's a lot of products out in the hunting industry specifically that have no business being in the hunting industry. They just see a customer base, they see a dollar, and that's all they care about. And they'll label it as such or do whatever as such with it. I could go and throw brands under the bus for an hour that I've seen this with. It's not real world. It's not real world. And I'll also say as a seed dealer, and don't call me to place a seed order. Sorry. Janice is allowing me to put out video content and, promote real world. I don't enjoy selling one bag of soybean seed on a Friday night to somebody who doesn't have enough seed. So the dealers, go you guys, to labor of love. But he said it earlier, like the margins aren't super high. Like there's not a ton of money in this seed sales. So if you think, oh, I'll be a real world dealer and I'm just going to retire doing that, you'd have to sell a lot of seed because the margins aren't super high. And I think that's great because it means that we're after quality. We're not after quantity, and I've loved it. I'm really excited about where things are going. I was, Don, I'll say this and shut up about real world. When I went to your dealer event, what was that, about a month or two ago?
It's the end of February.
Yeah. Okay. So about 2 months ago, I went to the real world event, the dealer event, had no idea what to expect. I don't know if you had a tally on how many people were there, and I don't know if that was one of your biggest, but I was really shocked at how many people and how much production went into showing the products, putting this together. I mean, you just have to ask yourself, how many other companies care enough to bring their dealers into a place and pour into them to teach them how to be better at the products and why they have the products they do? It was really impressive. I mean, do you know how many people were there? Do you guys have a tally?
Well, I think there was around 400 at that event. And, we also do some satellite events around the country, not a lot, but for our dealers and such, probably a half a dozen or so a year. But, it's every product that we sell. You listed most of them. Herbicides is another one.
Yeah, you have great prices on chemicals. I said that earlier. I was surprised, a better way to be one-stop shop.
We're using products that I use on my farm. If I wouldn't use it, I'm not going to sell it. And most of them were all tested on my farm before they ever came to market, going way back to the very beginning. But, I just know what it's like to be a wildlife habitat land manager and want the very best. Yep. I don't want second best. I want the best habitat I can have, and I got to use the best products to get that. And I know there's other people out there with the same interest and desire, and that's what the company was built on, customer service, as you mentioned. Janice is the glue that holds the company together. She's our general manager, and, Carrie, and you mentioned Corey, they all care about the customer and as well as the product going into the bag. So I think that's what sets us apart. And I'm not saying that there's not other good companies out there, because there definitely is, but we're just trying to be the best that we can possibly be.
Yeah, I really like that you said you're not going to be in big boxes, and I because you guys, you said it without even having to say it at a dealer event. You guys are putting your trust and your weight into the dealers, allowing the dealers to be successful. Correct me if I'm wrong, Don. People can't just show up at Real World and just buy a bag of seed without going through a dealer unless there's some kind of conversation had prior. Like, you guys want the dealers to be successful from the product.
Well, we do. You can stop into the Real World office and make a purchase of a bag of seed or whatever. A lot of local people do that, or people traveling through, but we definitely prefer that you support our dealer network. Most of these are small businesses. Almost none of them are just selling our seed. A lot of them it's part of a country store, right, or maybe
blinds, feeders, exactly. All the stands, all the outdoor stuff. It's just another tool in their arsenal as a small store.
Yeah, and we want you to support them first and foremost. But if that's not an option for you, we do ship every day of the week. There's days that we fill up a UPS semi with product going out, especially during miscanthus season. But, if there's something we can do better, we're also totally open to suggestions. We want to support that dealer network, but at the end of the day, we want it to be convenient for that customer. to get our product and to use that product, to have good information to get the best out of it.
Yep.
I get personal calls and text and emails daily from customers, and I always welcome that. And we want people to be successful because, as we talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, it's about the people. I want to have a positive impact on someone's hunting property as well as their life. And that's what it really boils down to, is being good stewards of the land, but also being good stewards of the platform and what God's given us.
I agree. And I think you guys do really, really well at that. I'll tell you, and then we can wrap this up. I was, when I had Terry on the podcast, I had always kind of wondered the backstory of Lester's Feet Foundation. And my grandpa was like one of my greatest mentors in life and who I looked up to the most. And I was kind of raised in the outdoors by him. He ironically wasn't much of a deer hunter. He was a cattle guy. So Don, you typically know those farmers. They're not real interested in deer. My grandpa would say that a sorry deer could tear up a lead anvil. And they tear up the fence and all these things he said. But I found my love for hunting through like teenage buddies of mine that would talk about bow hunting. I had already been deer hunting, early, but I didn't know about bow hunting. And they drug me in and killed my first deer at like 15. But kind of backing up, my grandpa is just who I really think of when I think of a man's man, a guy who created legacy, a guy who embodied what it's like to steward land, just all those things. So to get to hear from Terry that Lester's Feet was founded and named after his grandpa, like the story was just so similar. And I've even seen things as we're sidebarring into Lester's Feet, but as part of Don and Terry's podcast and part of the ripple effect that they're having in the community, there's a nonprofit called Lester's Feet Foundation that they are very active in. And Don, you will never know this. I'll tell you now that one podcast I was listening, and you guys, Lester's Feet, you were able to help put a roof on someone's house local to where I used to live using a contracting company called All Tech Roofing, who I used to have do all of the roofing and carpentry work on all of my house flips, had them do like hundreds of things for me. To hear on a podcast that they donated to Lester's Feet, I believe, their labor or whatever it was, and you guys were able to help someone in need, like that shows you how big this hunting community is and how small it is and how good it can be. It was really, really cool and fulfilling to see that. So I know you're doing it. I know you're wanting to leave a lasting impact. The last question I have for you, and we can quit. You've kind of already answered it, but I just want to give you the chance to say exactly what do you want to leave this world with? What do you want to leave this earth with when your time's up and it's all said and done? What do you want to be remembered for?
Well, I want to be remembered for using the platform that God gave me to glorify Him. And it's not about me. I'm only going to be on this earth for a very short time, but I want to leave things that are entrusted in my care better than what I found them. And when people remember me, I'm sure there's going to be comments about big deer I shot and things like that. But more importantly, I hope that I've opened people's eyes to what's really important. And, I've had a lot of young guys reach out to me and say, I started attending church and got baptized because of you. My family and I are now in church, and it's because of listening to your podcast. And those things mean more to me than shooting a big deer. And the reason for it is when a man starts taking charge of his family, spiritually, that has impact that lasts for generations. And when I gave that seminar there in Missouri at the church back in March, I was talking about, I started, it was a deer hunting seminar, but I transitioned into more of a spiritual. I gave my testimony and, told about my life story and some of the things that got me to the point where I am today. But when I started into that part of it, on the screen, I had a slide and it just had three numbers. It was 3-17-93, and it looked like a date. It looked like March 17th of 93. And I let that just sit there on the screen as I talked for several minutes. And what I talked about had nothing to do with 31793. And finally, as I wrapped it up, I said, you guys are probably wondering what this 31793 is. And I explained to them that if a child is the spiritual leader in their home, which doesn't happen very often, but occasionally it happens, about 3% of the time, that child will be able to lead a single person to Christ in their family. If the mother is the spiritual leader in the home, about 17% of the time, she will be able to lead someone to Christ in her family. But if the man is a spiritual leader in his home, 93% of the time, he's going to lead someone to Christ and maybe multiple people to Christ. Guys, we're dropping the ball. Our society is a mess today, and it's not because of women and it's not because of kids. It's because of men who are not upholding their responsibility to be the spiritual leaders in their home. And my goal and what I want to be remembered for is encouraging men to become that spiritual leader if they're not already. And every time that happens, I just feel like I've built my legacy a little bit.
Amen. Well, there's tons more we could talk about, Don. I have appreciated this immensely. I'd really benefit from the opportunity to go to breakfast or something if you're willing or have the time when I'm out in Illinois. I'm buying a farm that I really would love to show to you and kind of get some of your thoughts on, initial aerial feedback here. What do you see as the positives and negatives? But let's find some time to talk offline. If you'd be willing to mentor someone like me who would definitely listen to what do you think you would tell your 37-year-old self, I would be really appreciative of that. So for listeners, this has been episode 59 of the Legacy Through Land podcast. I appreciate you being on here, Don, and we will see you guys next week.
Thanks for having me, and maybe we can get Chris Brackett to meet with us and have him cook us breakfast or something.
Shots fired, Chris. You won't do it. You won't do it, Chris. I bet you won't. See you guys next week.
And that's going to wrap up this week's episode. If you're finding value in this content, we'd love to hear from you. It'd mean a lot if you could share with us how this podcast is helping you on your journey and let us know of any topics you'd like us to cover in the future. Be sure to connect with us on all social platforms at Legacy Acres Land Co. and subscribe to stay updated on when new episodes drop. We hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of the Legacy Through Land podcast, and we'll see you next week.